In the quiet hum of a suburban neighborhood where the chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves provided a comforting backdrop, Jack Foster sat alone in his living room, a glass of whiskey cradled in his hands. The warm amber liquid swirled slowly, mirroring the turmoil in his heart. Just months earlier, life had been a tapestry woven with love, laughter, and the promise of forever with his wife, Carol. They had shared dreams of retirement adventures, family gatherings, and the simple joy of watching their grandchildren grow. But now, the remnants of that idyllic life lay shattered, a cruel joke of fate that had left Jack staring into the abyss of betrayal. It all began on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday evening. Jack had returned home from work, his mind preoccupied with the day's events, only to find Carol unusually distant. She was scrolling through her phone, a slight smile playing on her lips that felt foreign to him. At first, he attributed it to the stress of her job, the demands of their lives, or perhaps just a momentary lapse. But as days turned into weeks, the distance grew, and Jack's unease morphed into a gnawing suspicion. After a long week, Jack decided to surprise Carol with a weekend getaway. He envisioned the two of them reconnecting, rekindling the spark that once burned brightly. As he planned their escape, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The late-night phone calls, the secretive glances, and the hastily closed apps whenever he entered the room painted a picture he was unwilling to accept. The truth, however, crashed down upon him like a thunderstorm. Jack had come home early one day, eager to share his plans for the trip. As he stepped into their home, the muffled sounds of laughter floated down the hallway, an unwelcome melody that sent chills down his spine. He followed the sound, heart racing, only to find Carol entwined in the arms of another man, a man he recognized as a colleague from her office. The world around him blurred as his heart shattered, the glass in his hand slipping and shattering on the floor. Carol's eyes widened in horror as she saw him standing there, the shock of discovery etched across her face. Jack felt a storm of emotions surge within him: anger, sadness, betrayal, but most of all, an overwhelming desire for justice. In the days that followed, Jack grappled with the emotional fallout. He thought of the life they had built together, the promises made and the vows exchanged. His mind churned with thoughts of revenge, not out of spite, but as a means to reclaim his dignity and find closure. He knew he couldn't confront her immediately. He needed a plan, an opportunity to show Carol the consequences of her betrayal, and to remind her of the love they once shared. He began to gather his thoughts and observations, watching Carol closely as she went about her life, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within him. He quietly documented the times she was out late, the little lies she told, and even reached out to a few friends who had seen her with the other man. The betrayal was not just personal. It felt like a betrayal of their shared life, their dreams, and the trust that once bound them together. Jack's plan took shape. He would expose her indiscretions, not in an explosive confrontation, but in a way that would leave her with the stark realization of what she had thrown away. He knew that the truth had a way of revealing itself, and he would be the one to guide it into the light. With every passing day, as he prepared his careful approach, Jack found a strange sort of strength emerging from the depths of his heartbreak. He was determined to take back control of his life, to show Carol that her actions had consequences, and to remind her of the love that had once flourished between them. As the sun dipped below the horizon one fateful evening, Jack stood at the crossroads of vengeance and justice, ready to unveil the truth that would not only change their lives, but also restore his dignity. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation to come, knowing that the storm he had weathered would soon give way to clarity. And as the shadows lengthened around him, Jack Foster was ready to reclaim his narrative. That evening, Jack sat in his dimly lit living room, the shadows dancing across the walls, mirroring the turmoil in his heart. He had spent the previous weeks meticulously planning his next steps. He knew that confronting Carol without a strategy would only lead to more heartbreak. Instead, he chose to gather evidence, text messages, photos, and even a recording of the heated argument he overheard between her and the other man. Each piece of evidence was like a stone, building a foundation for the confrontation he envisioned. Jack's friends had encouraged him to move on, to forget about Carol and focus on himself. But he couldn't shake the feeling that closure was necessary. He wanted her to understand the depth of her betrayal, not just to him, but to the life they had built together. He imagined the moment when he would lay out the truth before her, the look of realization dawning on her face as she grasped the full weight of her actions. As the weekend approached, Jack decided to invite Carol to dinner. He rehearsed his lines in his mind, stripping away any emotional outbursts. He would be calm, collected, and in control. He wanted her to see the man she had betrayed, not the broken husband she had left behind. The dinner was set for Friday, a time he hoped would allow her to let her guard down. The day arrived, and Jack busied himself in the kitchen, preparing Carol's favorite meal, a roasted chicken with rosemary and garlic. The aroma filled the house, a bittersweet reminder of happier times when they used to cook together, laughing and sharing stories. The table was set perfectly, with candles flickering gently, casting a warm glow over the scene. It was a stark contrast to the coldness that had seeped into their lives. When Carol arrived, Jack greeted her with a smile that barely masked the storm brewing inside. She looked beautiful, as always, but there was an air of tension between them that hung heavy in the air. They exchanged small talk, the kind that felt forced as they sat down to eat. Jack watched her closely, noting the way she shifted in her seat, her eyes darting away from his gaze. After dinner, Jack knew it was time. He cleared the plates, taking a deep breath to steady himself. As he poured them both a glass of wine, he felt the familiar knot in his stomach tighten. He turned to Carol, who was absent-mindedly playing with her hair, a habit he had once found endearing, but now grated on his nerves. "Carol," he started, his voice steady, "there's something we need to talk about." At the sound of his serious tone, her demeanor changed. The playful spark in her eyes dimmed, replaced by uncertainty. "What is it, Jack?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He took a seat across from her, laying the evidence on the table like cards in a game of poker. "I know about you and Mark, Jack said, watching her expression flicker between shock and denial. I've seen the messages. I have recordings. I know everything. For a moment, silence enveloped them, thick and heavy. Jack could see her mind racing, searching for a way to twist the narrative. But he pressed on, determined to maintain his composure. Do you remember when we first got married? The promises we made to each other? He continued, his heart aching as he recalled those tender moments. I don't want to drag this out, but I need you to understand what you've done. Carol's face paled, her eyes widening. Jack, I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake, she pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. A mistake? Jack echoed, his voice rising slightly. You think that's all this was? You threw away our life together for a moment of weakness? Jack leaned forward, his heart pounding, but he refused to let anger take over. He wanted Carol to feel the weight of her choices, to grasp the enormity of what she had lost. I'm not the one who made a mistake. You are. And now I'm going to show you just how much you've lost. He leaned back, allowing the silence to linger as he processed the confrontation. He was no longer the man who had been left heartbroken and defeated. He was a man reclaiming his narrative. The decision to confront Carol this way was not just for him, but for her to realize the impact of her actions. As the evening wore on, Jack felt a sense of empowerment building within him. He had laid the truth bare, and now it was time for Carol to reckon with the reality of her choices. He would not only reclaim his dignity, but would also ensure that Carol would never forget the depth of her betrayal. The night was far from over. Jack knew that the next steps would be crucial in redefining their relationship or ending it once and for all. As he prepared to reveal the final piece of evidence, he sensed the tension in the room shift, anticipation crackling in the air like static electricity. Jack was ready to lay it all on the line, to make sure Carol understood that actions have consequences and that justice would be served. Jack's heart raced as he watched Carol's face shift from shock to disbelief, and finally to a defensive rage. He had anticipated this reaction, but it still stung. You think you can just throw me away like yesterday's trash? She yelled, her voice echoing off the walls of their once happy home. Not throw you away, Carol, Jack said coolly, but I'm going to show you how deep betrayal cuts. He had spent weeks plotting his response, and now was the time to execute it. Jack, you don't have to do this. We can work through this, she pleaded, desperation creeping into her tone. Jack shook his head slowly. You've made your choice, and now I'll make mine. He stood up and walked to the living room where he had placed his laptop, ready to unveil his plan. With a few clicks, he pulled up a video he had recorded weeks earlier, a video of Carol and her colleague, laughing and sharing intimate moments. I wanted you to see what I've been looking at, he said, turning the screen toward her. Carol's face drained of color as she watched the betrayal unfold before her eyes. Jack, please, she stammered, but Jack held up his hand to silence her. This is just the beginning. I've reached out to some of our friends, the ones who care about us both. I've shared the truth with them. They deserve to know who you really are, he said, feeling a sense of power swell within him. No, you can't do that. You'll ruin my life, she cried, panic rising in her voice. Your life? What about the life you ruined? You think you can erase the hurt you've caused? "This is just a fraction of what you'll face," he replied, his voice steady. Jack knew that revenge wouldn't heal his wounds, but he felt a sense of justice in exposing the truth. He wasn't done yet. "I've also set up a meeting with a divorce lawyer," he added, watching her expression morph into utter despair. "You wouldn't really do that, would you? We can fix this," Carol begged, her tears flowing freely now. Jack remained silent, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. He felt no satisfaction in her pain, only a bittersweet sense of closure. "You've lost everything that mattered, Carol. I hope this teaches you a lesson about loyalty and trust." As the evening wore on, Jack packed a few belongings, preparing to leave the house that had once been a sanctuary. Carol's pleas faded into the background as he stepped outside into the cool night air. He took a deep breath, feeling light for the first time in months. His heart still ached, but he was free. Through the betrayal, Jack discovered his strength. He moved into a small apartment, finding solace in the company of supportive friends and family. With time, he healed, focusing on his career and rediscovering passions he had long neglected. Months later, as he sat in a cafe, laughing with a new friend, he looked back on that dark chapter not with bitterness, but with gratitude. He had learned invaluable lessons about self-worth and resilience. In the end, Jack realized that the best revenge wasn't about punishing Carol. It was about building a happier, more fulfilling life for himself. And as he raised his cup in a toast to new beginnings, he felt a sense of peace wash over him, knowing he had finally turned the page.